Welcome to Troublemakers, Lusekelo, Chinyama.
Thank you so much, Phil. I'm glad to be here and making this take.
Yeah, we tried one time. We tried one time to record this and we're back trying again. Technology. Yeah. The tech bros would have us believe that, if we just keep allowing our lives to be monetized, allowing our privacy to be commodified, our lives will get better and easier. And if you just register, log in with your Gmail, log in with your Facebook, etc., then everything will be streamlined. And we don't really find that to be the case always.
Unfortunately.
A friend told me that they wish they had one, remote to just point around their house at everything, with like 2 buttons on it,
Reminds me of is that Home Alone? Opens.
Yeah. Jury rigging the house for the thieves. And yeah. Those are the classics, huh?
Mm-hmm.
We're here today to talk about following the lead of the most impacted people, especially as it relates to building our movements, conceptualizing what is leadership in our movements and what does it look like. Does it always look like the charismatic person that everybody has to listen to and follow? Probably not. Social movements are kind of a different animal altogether.
Yeah.
And I wonder where your entry point is in this conversation.
My entry point primarily is with civil society and its role in strengthening and supporting the work of grassroots movements. Yeah. As civil society, as activists, as a lot of the frontline activists that we've heard of, we've found ourselves in a position where we've taken up this idea of being a voice of the voiceless, right? Just because you have a bit of some public speaking skills here and there, you have a bit of charisma, you have a bit of an education, you feel you're the best person to go and step up in a room and speak on behalf of people that are facing some of these issues. And I think we see that with civil society. We've seen projects that are tagged Voice of the Voiceless and so on and so forth. But it's not the best approach. For us to achieve social justice, for us to achieve human rights, the fulfillment of human rights for each and every person, it is the people that are affected by the injustices that should be at the forefront and lead those conversations.
So, in saying the voice of the voiceless, that phrase, right? That phrase is so proliferated. Yeah. Every organization, it's like kind of part and parcel of their sloganeering and all that kind of stuff. Politicians, when they have their campaign slogans, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Emerging human rights defenders.
Yeah. Right.
I'm the voice of the voiceless.
Yeah.
Speak for the people.
One of the things that, we've talked about with some guests on the show is how neoliberalism like atomizes us. We become these individual, all of a sudden I'm an activist, whatever that is, and I'm a known, person. I'm on a poster. I'm in your graphics. There was one viral video of an action I did, and now all the organizations want, me to support their cause for even things unrelated to whatever that action or campaign was that I was famously doing. Is this part of like let's say the campaigning context in Zambia?
It pretty much is, yes. Yeah, we do have a lot of that going on with organizations coming on board to co-opt the most daring amongst us onto their campaigns, even when those campaigns do not relate to them whatsoever, as opposed to going down to the ground and seeking the people that are affected by those issues too. Yeah.
What happens to those people once those daring people are fetched and sign on to these, very professional campaign programs? What happens to them?
I think what can I say? The intensity and is it vigorousness? Is that a right word?
Yeah. Maybe.
With which these campaigns are done. There's not much radicalism. It's not done in a vigorous way. It's because it's not coming from a pain point, right? It's not coming from a point of pain. It's not coming from a point of frustration. So because you do not experience the challenges in relation to that program or the social justice issue that you've formalized the campaign around, you will take on actions that are more moderate. This is where we see a lot more dialogue meetings, a lot more panel discussions to do advocacy, right? But when it's coming from a point of pain, rather from a point of frustration, there's a bit more radicalness to the approaches and the activities and the actions that you take to address your issues. This is where we see people staging protests, occupations, petitions, strategic public litigation, and so on and so forth, because it's coming from a point of pain and you're willing to take the risk that might come with some of those actions that you're willing to take to just shift perspectives and power.
Sure, and those people, there's a sense of urgency. It affects their lives directly, so they must act now.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas some of us are, privileged to have kind of like jobs that relate to supporting movements, and we may not be as directly affected. So we're kind of thinking, oh, okay, how can we write a grant for this? Then the timeline, how is it going to, we have this very projectized, totally removed from reality, but this very projectized kind of way of viewing things.
Even in cases where, say, for example, we have food insecurity, right? From the project perspective, or from the point of an outsider trying to lead, you're going to set timelines such as, oh, we're going to take a march in the Global Week of Actions in September to address this. But we're facing it now. We can't wait until September for our voices to be heard, right? So it's,
Right. Yeah. Or we wait until Black History Month to talk about Black people.
Yes, and racism, and
Yeah, 100%. There's Earth Day, if we want to get environmental about it at some point. So, I mean, as you were saying, voice of the voiceless, the thing that popped in my mind was, I don't know if you remember this organization called Invisible Children. It was this kind of American / Ugandan, white people come to East Africa, start an organization because there was suffering in some community based on war. They have a terribly simplistic and harmful analysis of what that war was, and so their recommendations and solutions are really off base. But they kind of famously had this kind of like zeitgeist moment. It must have been back in like 2011, 2012, where their main kind of way of doing things was to make a scrappy documentary film and then try to, tour it around to universities in the U.S. and say, give us money. We're doing now like post-war reconstruction work in northern Uganda as these, 20-something white boys, all American white boys coming from privileged families, whatever, So they thought they were really cool, and their filmmaking, if you can call it that, was really trying to center kind of like how cool they were, but they were really kind of like unaware. And I mean, even the name Invisible Children as an organization, I mean, how just inherently like dehumanizing is that to children? Yeah, it's condescending. Come on.
Yeah.
So they may have had like a point behind it or something, I don't know, maybe, but it just puts that kind of sour taste in your mouth immediately before you even know what it is.
Yeah.
And they had this film that came out called Koin 2012. Joseph Koin was like a warlord in northern Uganda. He sprung up with popular support against Museveni's government, who was, decimating northern Uganda for a long time. And then he went off the rails and started abducting children. So it wasn't like a righteous struggle,
Yeah.
He really employed, some methods that were terrible. But of course, on the world stage, they decided we're gonna make the household name Joseph Kony like famous. It's going to be a household name. Everybody's going to know this warlord guy. If we expose him, then the world will do something about it. And what the world will do is give money toward our organization, buy these bracelets, and then
Bracelets.
yeah, they were selling bracelets like in the film, as like the answer, like just buy these kind of like bracelets, then you'll be a contributor to the organization, and then you also need to lobby these politicians to have better military relations with Museveni. I mean, you're an African, you already see how you know Museveni and you know how terrible this guy is, right? Like, so bad solutions, but what was I mean, there were so many problems. This film became like a case study for like what not to do, like very quickly. It went massively viral. It was like one of the most on YouTube at that time. It was like one of the most virally circulated videos. Do you remember Rebecca Black when she had that song Friday? Okay, that was awesome. It was like a virality of equal proportions.
Yeah.
So, of course, YouTube has changed, but those days there were many people like our age kind of like pushing around this film saying get involved,
Yeah.
And some of us kind of came up against the film for many reasons, but one of which was they talked about these bad black people, and the way they talked about that these white guys were talking about these bad black people was to get their white children on the camera, like children who were I think very young, like maybe 5 or something,
Yeah.
And they would show these white children pictures. Who is this? And the child would say, "That's Joseph Kony. Who is he? He's a bad guy." Something like this.
Yeah.
It was almost like racistly, in a very overt way, like scripted. White good, black bad. So there were also like psychology students that I knew who were like writing papers about this.
Yeah.
So I think we had this kind of moment where we suddenly realized, and this was within our lifetimes, of course people have noticed this before, but collectively as like progressive people of the world, we kind of had this shift toward more conscious identity politics, but we still have these lingering things within what you're calling civil society, like NGO culture and professional culture, these relics, language relics of the past, voice of the voiceless, these kind of things. But that was the film that was the kind of thing that came to my mind. Invisible Children, Voice of the Voiceless.
Yeah, Voice of the Voiceless. It's it's a little condescending. Yeah. It's quite condescending.
Yeah, so we can analyze the problem to death and sorry for belaboring the point on that. But let's talk about like there are many people who want to make a difference in the world, and they're at varying levels of privilege, of access, of power in the world, of wealth, status. How does somebody who has more privilege, find themselves in a supportive role in building movement power?
First things first, show up. Just show up. You showing up is a sign of solidarity. A movement calls for a meeting, show up. They call you to take action, take a stand, show up. They tell you to share a hashtag on Twitter, wherever, just show up. Okay? In doing so, you have the opportunity to come closer to the people that are leading, the people that are most affected by that issue. And you have to ask. So don't show up with your own solution. Don't say, I'm going to show up and I'm going to bring bottles of water. What if they don't need water, right? What if all they need is your presence? Don't say, I'm going to show up and I'll make a donation of 5,000 to flyers. What if flyers just worsen their risk in that situation? I'm going to show up and bring a vehicle. What if that comes with risks? So primarily it's to show up. Reach out, express your solidarity, and ask them what they need. That is the best approach that one can take. A person that is in a place of privilege can take to get themselves involved in many of the social justice issues that we face. Yeah, so you don't walk up and say, because there's because there's a food crisis, or there's a food challenge, or there's a water crisis, water has been contaminated, I will just show up with bottles of water. What if those resources could go better could support more communal solutions other than, individual bottles of water? I think the best is to just consult. Yeah.
I mean, it sounds easy enough, but how many people do we know that come from privilege but can't listen to those who don't come from privilege?
Yeah. A lot of people don't. I mean, it comes with arrogance, the do-gooder arrogance. I remember seeing that in the Beautiful Trouble content or deck. Yeah, it comes. A lot of people with privilege. Yeah, a lot of privileged people have the do-gooder ego, the do-gooder arrogance. It comes with their education. They feel they know better because they understand the economics, they understand the politics, but it's different. So it is a challenge, and it takes a lot of humility to be able um to to take leadership and instruction from a person that might not have even gone through a formal education and so on and so forth. So, as activists or people that take on social causes, quote unquote, maybe for for lack of a better term, because even social causes has, it's been stretched out to be to more condescending contexts or connotations. Yeah, but it's you need to have humility. Yeah, be humble enough to come and help. Let your support not come from a point of ego and a point of ego and a point of control, or a point of um making yourself look a certain type of way, curating your image. And yeah, I'm losing my train of thought a bit, but I hope that does respond to your question.
Have you seen any good examples in Lusaka about good examples of movements that practice leadership from the bottom, let's say?
Leadership from the bottom, as in
Meaning like the most affected
the
people.
most affected people. Yes, from the top of my head, I'll give an example of the Youthful Parliament, initially established by two young men who had been marginalized from political participation for the sake of their youth because they were young.
They wanted to run
Yes, they
for
wanted to
office.
run for office, for political office, and right from within the political structures, noting that Zambia is generally it's generally conservative, it's patriarchal, it's ageist to an extent. You can see that in practice. You can see that in society. You can see that in our policies and so on and so forth. Yeah. So these two young people that had been denied well, one of them at least went up to being chosen by their constituency to be the one person that will, vie on behalf of a certain political party. And despite them having to go through all those political party stages and winning and getting to the top, they were sidelined by the president of the party for a much older candidate. So these two they both faced discrimination and marginalization in that respect, and they decided to start organizing around addressing these barriers that young people and especially young women face with regards to political participation. So yes, we do have I can speak of that from the top of my head. The Youthful Parliament is a good example of a social movement that has taken at least a bottom-up approach to addressing their cause.
I can tell you with certainty that we have listeners that come from rural movements to protect their land against transnational corporations or against wealthy elites in their respective places, who do have to, on occasion, sit down with, the organizations based in the capital city that have professionalized advocacy ways of doing things and budgets and audit reports and all these kind of things. What advice would you give to them when they find themselves in the same room with these organizations?
Is the advice going to the organizations
To
or
the comrades that are affected by, say, land grabs in a rural area, and now they have to, they know how to do they've been doing meetings for since time immemorial, as a
Mhm.
community. So they sort of know how to organize themselves locally, maybe. But,
Yeah.
now they're coming to the capital city because presumably there's an organization that could help them. And they need to sit together, you know, probably in a meeting in the capital city in a fancy hotel or,
Yeah.
at a press conference or
Mhm.
something of the kind. So what advice would you give those people?
Yeah, I would speak of how the organizations that they're meeting are potential allies, really strategic allies, and that they should the grassroots organize it would be best for the grassroots organizers to sit down and identify the gaps in their efforts, right? Because causes have different antagonists playing different roles, um, different systems and structures that reinforce their marginalization and the social injustice that they face, right? So it would be good to sit down and try to map where there are gaps in their efforts, right? So yes, you could be targeting agents of the state, for instance, but you don't quite have the capacity to target the legislative side of things, right? Do they have a good understanding of the different legal instruments that are available that reinforce
Hmm.
that inequality, right? So these institutions in the urban areas would play that role of mapping out that information as a support role, mapping out that information, identifying where or the points of lobbying in that area, and acting by the direction of the grassroots organizers. But primarily is to identify what the gaps are and then give instructions to the organizations or the allies that you have identified, the organizational allies that you have identified, based on the gaps that you have. Yeah.
Is there any other reflection that you'd like to share with us on this topic of following the lead of the most impacted people?
Um, just to mention that in this wave there's currently a wave, there seems to be a shift and an emphasis on working with social movement
Mm.
and amplifying the work, supporting the work of social movements, as it's more direct, it is more radical, it has more impact. There's need for everyone individually, institutions. There's a need for everyone to step back, reflect, the causes that we are championing, even as we say we support movements, are we, first of all, directly affected? Are they informed? Even the movements themselves, the issues that we're addressing, are they informed by the people that are affected, right? What exactly is our role? Is it to direct? Is it to, to there's a lot of limitations that come in linking movements to organizations, for instance. Yeah, so it would be good to sit back, reflect, understand how social movements and grassroots communities that are organizing, how they operate, and how we can best position ourselves so that we don't um, shut down or quiet their efforts or reduce their efforts and their impact, and that we just ensure that it is their voice that is at the forefront. Well, my reflection goes deeper than this, but I mean, for the sake of time, I think it's time to sit back, reflect, assess ourselves. Are we good allies, and how best can we be good allies?
A lot of organizations are talking about this phrase "do no harm,"
Yeah.
and I kind of I object to the premise of it because I think in most things you will do a little harm,
Mm.
even if you kind of follow as many best practices. There will be unintended harms, and this is part of the struggle of being in solidarity. Is that
Yeah.
we are different kinds of people with different experiences, and we trip over our own feet sometimes and over each other's feet. So to totally like eliminate the possibility of harm to me is kind of like a pipe dream. But I think the sentiment is like, first reflect on whether we're damaging the struggle, and if so, maybe we are not the right organization, or we're not ready yet, or like even just holding that as like a possibility, I think is maybe one step.
Yeah, to not doing harm. Yeah.
Yeah, or minimizing at least.
Yeah, there'll always be collateral damage.
Yeah, yeah. It sounds like you're
Yeah.
speaking from experience. Uh-oh. You don't have to share,
Yeah.
Lusekelo.
No.
How about
Yeah.
we try to prophesize something a little bit more optimistic? If you reach behind you, yes, the beautiful Trouble card deck is with us. And there's a game in this deck that, well, a game, it's a ritual, it's a practice.
It's a practice.
Yeah. That we call Divine the Future. And we just take this whole card deck, we ask it a question, and then we ask you to cut the deck.
Yeah.
And hopefully that will give us some answers, which we'll hear your reflections about. And what question would you like to ask this card deck? It could be in relation to this conversation, in relation to your work, your struggles in Zambia or elsewhere.
I honestly don't know. I don't know. A question to the card deck.
Yeah.
Before I shuffle?
Before you cut the deck, yeah.
Before I cut the deck. Nah, let me just go ahead and cut the deck.
Just cut the deck. We need something. We need something. You got to speak your energy into it in particular.
Well, people becoming more enlightened about neoliberalism.
All right, let's see what the deck has to say. You can reach over and cut her up. Okay. Baraza.
Okay.
Baraza, you can just read the card for us.
Yeah, let me do so. A large community gathering to discuss important matters, share information, and hold leaders to account. People everywhere have organized baraza-like gatherings under various themes, town halls, in England, indignados, in Madrid, diwaniyat, in much of the Arab world. It is fundamental to the human way of being, feeling a need to come together, belong, and work toward a better community. What is the baraza of your culture? How can you harness it to improve things? Yeah. I did speak into it.
Yeah, totally. It relates to our conversation. It definitely is a reasonable response, I think, to will people become more enlightened about
neoliberalism. Yes. So holding more barazas to assess neoliberalism, its impact, its most subtle ways and forms of infiltrating our societies and our world, right? Yeah, and through the baraza, to have these discussions, people will most likely be more, not even most likely, they will. We're divining positive things, right? They will be more enlightened and will share strategies on how it can be addressed.
Is social media a replacement for baraza? Do we have digital barazas? Do they have the same oomph as that grassroots under the mango tree?
I think yes. I think yes, to a certain extent. A good example is the recent protests in Kenya with the Gen Zs. A lot of that organizing happened on Twitter. The conversations took place on Twitter, and so I think it's social media is a great tool. Yeah.
All right, we'll pick up from there with the next podcast episode when you're back.
Yeah.
And we'll see by then, if the billionaires haven't totally consolidated and
Oh yeah, and speaking of it's now X rather, right? Speaking of Twitter, really great platform controlled by a very obnoxious billionaire. Yeah, so that really is a good conversation to pick up.
Yeah. Sure. Thanks for joining me here today, Lusekelo. It's been great to have you.
To be back.
All the best.
Thank you.
Hi. We hope you enjoyed the conversation on this episode of Troublemakers and feel inspired to stir up some good trouble in your own community. Do feel free to check out our other episodes and subscribe to Troublemakers podcast in your preferred podcast app. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook as troublemakers.podcast for all the latest updates, behind the scenes content, and sneak peeks of what's coming next. We also love to hear from our listeners. You can email us via troublemakersthepodcast@gmail.com or simply drop a DM through our social media. And hey, if you enjoyed this episode, take a moment and share it with a friend or leave us a review. It really helps us grow our community of troublemakers. Keep shaking things up.